Well, thank you for the opportunity to be with you today. I am truly, truly delighted to be here. It's always wonderful for me to get back into ag country. It just seems to be a certain balance to life here that's frankly hard to find in DC sometimes. I'm sure you don't know anything of what I speak of. But having said that, I want you to know I'm not a DC hater. I thoroughly enjoyed my decade or so working in DC and honestly felt very honored to work alongside some very hardworking people in the proverbial swamp. And I think we're very fortunate in agriculture that today we have some very hardworking people working on your behalf. So I hope you don't take them for granted. They certainly deserve a lot of credit for what they do. That said, there are some real sobering realities facing us, and they should serve as a wake-up call to all of us. Take the Farm Bill, for example. This round of negotiations, there was more talk than ever before about separating nutrition programs from farm programs. Well, imagine for just a minute what would happen if that occurred in the next round or the round after that. So a skeptical public is going to support around $20 billion in farm program support that impacts roughly a little less than 2% of the population. What are we going to do about that? How can we work to make sure that we don't face a situation where that support is called into question? Because there's no doubt we have a skeptical public waiting for us. And as you know, that erosion of trust has impacted agriculture in a very real way already. Take your pick, cage-free, antibiotic-free, RBST-free, right? It's affected your ability to do your jobs. That's part of the reason that I am so delighted to hear what I heard even in the introduction this morning and from the folks who spoke about sharing your story and noting the number of views something gets and sharing your accounts. We're going to talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. But all of this is really a big part of the reason that I joined the team at the Center for Food Integrity. My days at USDA were among my absolute favorite. And when I wrapped up my crazy whirlwind in DC of government service, I asked myself, well, what do I want to do next? You know, I've been on this wild ride, and what I wanted to do was come back to all of you. I so enjoyed my time. I have so much respect for what you do, but we have some work ahead of us. So let's dig into that a little bit. So for those of you who don't know, the Center for Food Integrity, our entire mission is to help today's food system earn trust. That's it. We don't lobby, we don't advocate for a particular brand, we don't endorse. We just work with our members and partners trying to build trust. So let's do some level setting. What do we know about today's food system? We know it's safer, more available, and more affordable than ever before, yet consumers are more skeptical than ever before. So how did that happen? Well, for one thing, as I mentioned, it's less than 2% of the population that has a direct connection to agriculture today, right? So 98% of people don't really have an understanding of what you do. And you probably get plenty of evidence of that, but in case you need one more tidbit, my son, when he was in the 8th grade in Northern Virginia, could not convince his class that potatoes do not grow on trees. Couldn't do it. Another class, in one of the science classes, there was several of the young ladies who did not believe that Easter eggs were the same thing as the eggs that you buy in the grocery store that come from chickens. That's what we're facing, right? But there's more than that. There's skepticism. And the consolidation and integration and industrialization scares people, right? They don't know what to think of it, in part because they don't understand what you do. Add to that how much communications have changed, right? The traditional model of communications is you pretty much had 3 networks with 3 guys who looked a lot alike, who said a lot of the same things at the same time every night. Right? That was a lot of our sources and a couple of key newspapers. Well, today, that communications network is very, very tribal. It's masses of communicators today. that tribal nature of communications that social media has helped to foster creates some real challenges, some real opportunities, but also some real challenges for us. And we had a group of moms come in, and we asked, what sources have you used to conclude that GMOs are dangerous? And Heidi said, I'm part of a mom's group. When there's a big consensus, I think there's something there. You don't need doctors and scientists confirming it when you have hundreds of moms. That's very real, folks. Yeah, and a little bit shocking, right? So Alan Alda does a lot of work in the area of communicating science, and he was asked why the hostility toward science. And he said trust is really important and comes down to science and the public have separated so much that many people consider science just another opinion. Ladies and gentlemen, what have we done in agriculture for the last couple of decades? The science, right? What, you're worried about GMOs? Well, here's 100 studies. What, you're still worried? Well, here's 100 more, right? And we haven't won pointing to the science. So we dug into what makes food information credible in today's world. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I want to give you just a sense of how people are feeling about that. First of all, there's a spectrum of beliefs, and their belief about food information is shaped by their relationship to the truth. Now, you might say, well, the truth is the truth, right? But not to most people, or a lot of people. On the left end of the spectrum, and by the way, this isn't a political spectrum, you have the extreme left politically and extreme right politically, both on the right end of this spectrum. But on the left is scientific objectivity. So these are the folks who actually believe that truth is objective and it's supported by facts. In the middle are people for whom truth is both objective and subjective. So they want to know what the science says, but they don't want to read all the studies. But more importantly, they want to know the ethical grounding for it. And that's key. And on the right are people for whom truth is just plain subjective. If it aligns with my views, then it's true, right? We all know the screamers and the loud folks. Interesting thing about that, we sometimes get so focused on those loudest voices on the right end of the spectrum, and guess what? They're not very influential, because most people on the rest of the spectrum see them as extreme and don't have a lot of tolerance for what they're saying. So mostly those on the right just fight with each other. So it breaks down basically to 5 different groups. The scientifics, whom we've been speaking to for a long, long time, guess what? 6% of the population. They're the ones that like that scientific evidence. The philosophers, 9% of the population, but these are the culture creators. These are the ones influencing the conversation. And the good news is they still care about the science, but they want to know the ethical grounding for it. A lot of them are concerned about the environment, so that's one area where we can align values. And animal care is another area. 39% followers, they just want simple and clear messages. These are the folks who are out there working hard every day. They have crazy schedules. They're trying to maybe live on a budget, but mostly they're tired of the conflicting information. So they just want information simple and clear and tell me what I can do about it. Then you have the wishful thinkers, and they're looking for promising claims and answers to their problems. Personal testimony is very compelling to them. And that last group that we've been talking about, the existentialists, 14%, food information is credible if it validates my beliefs. So we're not going to worry about them, right? We're going to look at the philosophers who are influencing the conversation and the followers who are influenced by the philosophers. Put those two together and you have about half the population. And what do we learn from that? We need information to be clear and understandable, not scientific, not buried in data. We need information to be ethically grounded. What is the right thing to do? You all do the right thing every single day. You're just not used to calling out the fact that you're doing the right thing. But sometimes people need to hear that. The source is relatable and shares similar values with us, or with the public. So part of the way we reach them is establishing that what they care about, we care about. And you might think, I'm not aligning my views with those crazies out there, right? But when you drill down, even the activists, or at least the loud advocacy voices, have some fundamental values that are absolutely aligned with yours. So who you are is as important as what you know. Telling your personal story is very compelling. You're in a very noble profession. Consumers want scientific grounding, not scientific information. So we want to avoid jargon and speak their language, right? We can talk about the safety of GMOs, but if we talk about it strictly in the sense of scientific studies, we're not going to help our cause. The public wants assurance that it's the right thing to do. So we need to lead with the benefits that are important to consumers. So we spent 10 years studying trust, and we worked with Iowa State University on peer-reviewed and published research that looked at what makes trust. And everybody thinks it's going to be the facts, right? When really it's the shared values. So shared values are 3 to 5 times more powerful in building trust than science and facts. So we've had the equation exactly backwards. We've been answering the science question, which is the can question, when what people are asking is the ethical question. What should we do? So that means we need to do some adjusting, right? Historically, we talk about research proving that we can do something, or how it'll increase efficiency or profitability, right? You all know that that's the framework that we've used for many, many things. What if we start talking about how something helps us consume fewer natural resources, right? We've started to do that. There's kind of an awakening going on, I think, where we're drilling down to those shared values, but we need to do it on a much, much larger scale. So what are some of those shared values? Producing healthy, affordable food, it's such a simple reference. Like, well, of course that's what we do. Not a bad idea to reinforce. And that exact language, producing healthy, affordable food, we've tested year after year after year. And when we tested it in the context of top concerns. So what are you most worried about? Healthcare, economics, education, and having a healthy, affordable food supply ranks in the top 5 for the last at least 4 years. So when you talk about what you do, talk about producing a healthy, affordable food supply. Benefits to animals, so improving animal care and reducing suffering. Very, very impactful. And then benefits to the environment, which we talked about a little bit, protecting our natural resources. So just to use the GMO situation as an example for a moment, we know that GMOs have become an icon for industrialized ag, right? Half the people can't even tell you what GMO stands for, and the concern certainly isn't related to the technology. We do consumer panels that we host, and it's remarkable what some people think GMO stands for or actually is. You get just some crazy, crazy ideas. And that's partly our fault. Let me go back for a minute. So our communications have been focused on science and very, very limited when it comes to values. And if you need some evidence of that, I'll just give you one example. We also work with the federal agencies trying to help with their communications. And so this is what USDA says on biotechnology. Within USDA, APHIS is responsible for protecting ag from pests and diseases. Under the Plant Protection Act, they have regulatory oversight over products of modern biotechnology that could pose such a risk. That's it. That's what APHIS says. We talk about how GMOs could pose a risk. So when you want to be critical of the public for doubting GMOs, we need to look in the mirror a little bit and see how we're doing. And just to make USDA feel better, I'll also show you what EPA says about it. And I'm not even going to try to read this. Like, what? Right? That's the feeling you get after you read it. So we need to understand that, meet consumers where they are, right? There's a published study that says 33% of respondents thought non-GMO tomatoes don't have genes, and 32% thought vegetables don't have DNA. So when we think we're speaking very simply about what we do and what GMOs are, we have to remember that we have to start at the base floor, right? So think about the way we traditionally talked about the benefits of technology. It helps increase yield and improve efficiency. Tell me what that means to somebody who thinks potatoes grow on trees, right? It's not yield and efficiency. It should be about using fewer resources or less water or better protecting the soil. We talk about how GMO crops are often disease and insect resistant and oftentimes have thrown in, and by the way, that increases the profitability of farmers. Well, the good news is, in our testing, consistently, consumers have no problem with farmers making money. It's not that you shouldn't earn a living like everybody else. It's when they're scared that you're going to put profitability ahead of the public interest. That's when they get scared. So when we talk about GMOs increasing profitability and they're scared of GMOs, what are we setting off in their minds? We talk about how biotechnology helps US farmers feed a growing world, which is fantastic, and of course that's a noble calling. The problem is 1 in 5 consumers finds that compelling. 1 in 5. And we think there's a couple of reasons for that. One, food is so abundant in the US that it's hard for Americans to wrap their heads around this notion that there truly is, all that need out there. But also, and perhaps more importantly, what they worry about is feeding a growing world means you're willing to cut corners or do things that compromise safety in order to feed that growing world, including GMO products, right? So that's how the picture fits together for consumers, and we just have to present them with a different picture. So talking about modifying plants to consume less water, allowing you to produce more food using fewer natural resources. Talking about modifying plants to eliminate allergens, so fewer people will have allergic reactions to food. That's what's going to be possible with gene editing, right? So that opens up a whole new world. All the people with gluten allergies, or moms who are scared to send their kids to school because of peanut allergies. And another example, pigs that are resistant to a common, often deadly disease will suffer less, and fewer will die. I will tell you, so that's some research being done right now in the gene editing area. And we actually work with the developers of that and have had some conversations about how to frame that. And the initial conversation was framing it as addressing a disease that costs farmers millions of dollars every year. No. We're addressing a disease that causes suffering and death every year, right? It's just a little different framing of it. Yes, it also costs farmers millions of dollars, and that's great to address, but that's not what's going to be compelling to the public. One of the interesting things that we discovered in our research is when you ask people who they trust to ensure safe food, you get family doctors, farmers third on the list, right? You're a highly trusted bunch. They don't necessarily trust farming, but they trust farmers. Dietitians, nutrition advocacy groups, federal agencies dropped down to 8, food companies toward the bottom. So we do a lot of communications training, and I often hear farmers say, well, I'm just one farmer, what do I know? I don't do that social media stuff. You got all those big food companies out there, let them do it. Who's trusted? Who's going to have a more impactful effect? Now let's look at who's held responsible. Federal food agencies at the top, food companies second, farmers third. That's a great place to be. You are as trusted as you are held responsible. That is a position of great influence and great responsibility, in my opinion, because federal regulatory agencies have an important role here, but they're not very trusted, and food companies are in even worse shape. So that's a lot of responsibility, ladies and gentlemen. So you're highly trusted, but not highly engaged. Nearly 50% of farmers, they say, are on Facebook, but fewer than 10%, less than 10% use it to advocate for agriculture. Only 9% are on Twitter, and it's only a fraction of those who engage on Twitter to advocate for agriculture. Social media is where the conversation's happening. It's not the only place, and we can talk a little bit about that too, but it's an important place. The great news is that 2 out of 3 consumers, 65%, and in our previous research it's been even higher, 70–80%, want to know more about farming. They may be skeptical, but they are hungry for information. And that's a big opportunity. We were joking about millennials a minute ago, and it's easy to dog on millennials, right? Somehow they're just easy to take a swipe at. Well, guess what? Huge opportunity with millennials because they may be skeptical, but the research suggests they are as skeptical of the activists as of the food system. So they're listening and they're interested. Are you talking to them? Are you telling your story? So going back to that 2% of the population, I'd like to issue a challenge to all of you today. The 2% challenge. So I'm going to ask you to spend 2% of your work time building trust. Now that assumes a 40-hour week, so I'm giving you a break because we all know no farmer works only 40 hours. But if it were a 40-hour week, that's just 1 hour a week. Can you set aside 1 hour a week to think about how you might engage? And again, it doesn't have to be social media, but failure to do so leaves it in other people's hands to tell agriculture's story. We've done that too long. We're here to help, and I so appreciate your time. Talking for just a minute about those ways of engaging beyond social media. You can do it. The last presentation I gave, a gentleman stood up and said, I don't do that social media stuff, but I offered to do a presentation at the local library, and the place was packed. I couldn't believe it, he said. So there are all different ways, letters to the editor, social media, and we can talk more about those. But I hope you'll take this to heart. I hope you'll take the challenge. I think we have an enormous opportunity in agriculture, and thank you all for what you do.